for his party's failures to stop the boats. And a sleepy Norfolk village hits the headlines today as a local row breaks out over whether to fly the Union Jack. The parish council was told flying our country's flag over the village hall was too divisive. We'll try to make sense of that one with a local politician. State of the Nation starts now. Now, throughout the programme, I'll be joined by my panel, the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol-Turner and the Daily Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley. Of course, as ever, let me know your thoughts as well. gbnews.com/your say is the address to visit. But before all of that, here's your very latest news headlines. Tom, thank you very much and good evening to you. Just coming up to 2 minutes past 8. The top story tonight. A mother and a daughter remain in hospital after being stabbed today in central London. Their conditions, though, aren't thought to be life-threatening, and a man has been arrested following that attack. A local security guard told us earlier he heard a scream before tackling the knifeman in Leicester Square.
I jumped on him, hold the hand in which he wasn't having a knife, and I just put him down on the floor and just hold him and kick the knife away from him. And then a couple of more people joined as well, and we just hold him until the police came. It took like maybe 3 to 4 minutes. Police arrived, and they just took him into the custody. And the child, just like all my colleagues, they gave him first aid, and in the middle, police came as well, and they just gave the first aid.
In Greater Manchester, 2 people have been arrested after a man died falling from a 4th-floor balcony. A 37-year-old man and a 40-year-old woman are being questioned on suspicion of murder. More than 18,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. That's after just 740 people crossed on Sunday. 704, rather. The highest number on a single day since Sir Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. A 12-year-old boy has become the youngest person to be charged with violent disorder after the recent riots across the UK. He admitted to violent disorder charges after throwing a missile at a police van and was also filmed kicking the window of a passing bus. Unrest broke out after the killing of 3 young girls in Southport 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary has said respect for the police must be restored after they faced what she's called brazen abuse and contempt during rioting. Yvette Cooper says it's crucial to maintain a strong police response on the ground and to keep up the pace of arrests and prosecutions. Police remained on high alert over the weekend, but there was no widespread unrest. The Prime Minister has issued a joint statement with French and German leaders calling for a ceasefire negotiation between Israel and Hamas to resume immediately. It comes as the US is warning Iran could attack Israel this week. Tehran's insisted on its right to an appropriate and deterrent response after the assassination of a senior Hamas official there. The Lebanese militant group Hezbollah is also understood to want a revenge following the death of their chief of staff in Beirut. And I believe we can now take a quick listen to a statement from our minister.
So the statement from the Prime Minister and the leaders of France and Germany just underlines how concerned we are about the risks of escalation in the region. We're making a strong statement of the need for calm in the region and to Iran in particular, not to escalate the situation.
In Paris, an investigation is continuing after a British man climbed the Eiffel Tower on the last day of the Paris Olympics. The shirtless climber was seen scaling the 330-metre landmark yesterday, just hours before the closing ceremony. He has now been released under investigation for endangering lives and for trespassing. England cricketer Graham Thorpe took his own life after battling years of anxiety and depression, according to his family. In a statement, his wife Amanda says she and Graham's 2 daughters are devastated and said he felt they'd be better off without him. Thorpe, who died at the age of 55, has been hailed as one of England's best cricket players, with a distinguished international career hitting 16 Test hundreds for England. And if you or someone you know is struggling with their mental health, you can find help and advice on the Samaritans website, that's samaritans.org, or you can call 116 123. And finally, to the US, Donald Trump has returned to social media platform X tonight ahead of a live interview with the owner, Elon Musk. The former president posted on the network for the first time in a year, promoting his claim that the 4 criminal prosecutions he's facing are politically motivated. Trump's interview with Musk is expected to offer him a chance to regain the spotlight as he campaigns in difficulty, with Vice President Kamala Harris closing the gap now in opinion polls. The event on Musk's platform aims to reach a broader audience, though past broadcasts have faced some technical issues. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sam Francis. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
This is State of the Nation at 6 minutes past 8. Now, the Metropolitan Police have launched an investigation after an 11-year-old girl and 34-year-old woman were stabbed in central London this lunchtime. The extraordinary attack was launched on the child and her mother in front of shocked tourists in the heart of Leicester Square. A 32-year-old man has been arrested and taken into custody. The police say they don't believe the suspect and the victims were known to each other. Now, it's important to note that while this attack on ordinary members of the public is terrifying, it is not being treated as terror-related. Let's cross straight to the scene, and joining me now is GB News reporter Adam Cherry, just outside where that incident took place. Adam, what do we know?
Well, Tom, in the last hour, we've received a statement from the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, saying, I remain in close contact with the Met about the appalling attack in central London today. A man has been arrested and is in custody. That's a 32-year-old man we heard described in the bulletins, and the attack happened just behind me. On behalf of Londoners, Sadiq Khan saying, I'd like to pay tribute to Abdullah, the security guard, who heroically risked his own safety to come to the aid of victims. Now, for those watching on television, you'll see just behind me, this is the scene of the crime. In the last couple of hours, we've seen a forensics team gather evidence here, both on the street where the stabbing itself happened and in this shop to my left where paramedics treated the victims before they were taken to hospital. Now, as we said in the bulletins, those injuries are not expected to be life-threatening. The mother in a less serious condition than the 11-year-old daughter. But as I say, a man now in custody and those 2 victims receiving treatment as we speak.
Adam, it is just the most shocking event. Let's take a quick look at the arrest of this suspect. We can see police officers holding the suspect there in broad daylight. I mean, this was lunchtime in Leicester Square. It's hard to think of a more central location in London. What do we know about the suspect?
Well, the Metropolitan Police don't have any insight into the motivation for this attack, although we do understand that the suspect was not known to the victims. So that's what the Metropolitan Police are confirming this evening. They do not believe the suspect was known to the victims, and that's all we have to go on at this time, Tom. It's a very confusing scene. As you can see, it is still an active crime scene, so the area is still cordoned off, although most of the police and the forensic teams have now left with their bagged evidence, but we expect this to be closed for quite some time yet into the evening.
Well, thank you very much, Adam, for being there for us and letting us know precisely what went on. Thank you. Now, weeks of disorder, multiple stabbings in broad daylight, and the Prime Minister hinting letting prisoners out early to free up space in our prisons. Just what's going on with law and order in Britain? Well, let's get the views of my panel now. The author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner and the Daily Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley. Amy, it does feel like sort of the social fabric of the United Kingdom is breaking down a bit. I mean, the number of stabbings and riots and machete fights. What's going on?
I know. I totally relate to that feeling of powerlessness. Another story coming in. It's just so shocking to hear about it. And it is hard to think what could be behind this. But I think the common thread is probably there is a lack of opportunity since austerity. There's deprivation. There's record levels of inequality. We've also got a mental health crisis. particularly in younger people. We just heard today about Valdo Calaconi, who murdered Grace Kumar and Barnaby Webber last year, and that his mental health had been flagged and hospital orders were in place, and he wasn't offered the right protection that could have prevented this violence from happening.
Or he wasn't locked
Violence
up.
surely shouldn't be inevitable. It is preventable. So we need to look at things that can bring it back to being preventable and being controllable.
Tim, do you buy that analysis?
I think to some extent violence in society is inevitable because we're human beings and we're flawed and broken, and many of us are quite violent. I don't think that people stab people because of deprivation. I just don't. Now, on a case-by-case basis, it's very difficult to say what causes things. We don't know what is behind this attack in Leicester Square. But if you stand back, it's very difficult not to see a general pattern of violence involving knives. What is causing that? How are people getting access to them? Why are they using this? It does feel somewhat like an epidemic. I don't like that phrase, but it does have the feeling of a disease in the sense that one person does it and then someone else does it. It strikes me that there might be an element of imitation in this.
A social contagion.
A social contagion,
But
yes,
certainly
exactly.
a public health crisis.
But
Right.
Isn't
But crime
it just...
is not a public health crisis.
Well,
crime is crime. Crime is a moral choice by the individual
You're saying
to
at
do
this
wrong.
point that it's endemic, which is also what was said in Glasgow when there was a massive knife crime problem, and the way that they dealt with it was by recognising it as a public health crisis and treating it holistically, and they actually saw the numbers reduce. So yes, you're right to say deprivation isn't the sole cause. Of course it's not, but there isn't one sole cause. It's a combination of so many different factors, and that's why where in places where it has been treated holistically, it tends to have had positive effects.
Amy, I want to pick up you on the question of austerity. I mean, the state has never spent more money than it is spending at this moment in peacetime.
OK, but if we take an example of the police force, we have seen that cut down.
And then built back up.
But built back up with untrained police officers. They cut most of the areas of expertise, which we're now seeing that we desperately, desperately need. So that's just one case of where austerity has impacted this, but austerity across the board. If you haven't got money invested into services and you haven't got the early prevention, that's why I mentioned education, if people are growing up in a world where they don't have opportunities when they get to their formative years, then they're going to turn to other things.
Tim, what do we know about what the government is actually going to do about this? Are we going to have higher stop and search? Are we going to have more patrols, bobbies on the beat? Or what is the solution here?
Well, I think Amy's absolutely right. Police numbers were cut. They are now going back up again. Yvette Cooper wrote an article for the Daily Telegraph arguing that respect for police officers is down, and she pinned that on underfunding, the need to put more people on the beat, but also on political interference and politicians talking down policemen and adding to that sense of disrespect. So I suspect you're going to see more funding. This government has proven itself to be not libertarian. It's not Jeremy Corbyn who's in power, it's Keir Starmer, a former director of public prosecutions. Just look at his response to the riots. Nearly 1,000 people have now been arrested, and the sentences that are being handed down, he doesn't control those, but the sentences being handed down are very stiff. So I think we're probably going to see a tough law and order response on the part of the Prime Minister.
Will we, though? Because, of course, there is this perception that when it comes to rioters, white working-class rioters, justice is swift.
Yes.
And when it comes to other acts of criminality, we've seen more lenient sentences and justice taking longer to be delivered.
Asian men who were involved in the riots have also been arrested and sentenced. I just want to throw that in. I take that point, and some people might feel with regards to knife crime, why couldn't you do this? Why couldn't you do what's been done with the rioting with knife crime? Why is it that in the past, can't blame Labour for this, but why in the past have rapists had relatively light sentences and these people get very tough ones?
Well, the sentencing guidelines were drawn up by the Sentencing Council, a member of which was Sir Keir Starmer.
OK, I did not know that. Okay.
But you're right. Governments have said, if you're found with a knife, then we'll quickly bring you to justice, and it's just not happened. But with the... You suggested a two-tier policing, I think.
I think, yes, absolutely. I said there's a perception of that.
Because those people are pleading guilty, so it's a quick process.
Yeah, that's a good
it's
point.
not straightforward.
Yeah.
And I think it's not helpful to suggest that this is an example of two-tier policing because they're being dealt with swiftly. They're being dealt with swiftly because they're pleading guilty.
Well, I mean, there are other cases of people pleading guilty.
And it's not just the justice bit, it's the policing bit as well. I mean, the other question to ask is, why was there not so much concern about aggressive public behaviour when Jews felt intimidated in the October 7th demonstrations?
Well, isn't there a pretty clear answer? There's political direction when it comes to these prosecutions, saying we're going to run courts on the weekends, we're going to sit much longer. We want this to be a very clear and almost making an example out of rioters to stop the present problem of specific
if a synagogue had been set on fire, that would have been dealt with very promptly.
And to be fair to Sir Keir Starmer, when he was Director of Public Prosecutions...
They're not comparable. You cannot compare the Palestinian marches to the riots.
When there were those riots in 2011, and Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions, he did have 24-hour sentencing and very rapid, and it was much the same thing.
When the British state decides that it wishes to crack down on a group of people, it can be as swift as a South American junta. It's almost admirable to watch. It's breathtaking. But I just don't understand why it couldn't have been done for gangland knife crime in the past.
Well, precisely. I suppose there is the sort of get-out clause that this is to stop a specific and immediate problem that is happening in one isolated moment in time. And to be fair, so far, it seems to have worked. There is a very clear message that has been sent.
Yeah.
But Amy, I suppose, couldn't that message be sent more often in more cases of illegality?
Well, we've only had this government for 5 weeks, and I think what they've inherited is hardly any courts, hardly any prison spaces, hardly any police. Like, they're dealing with not the best tools to equip themselves with fast justice. I'm sure they would love to be able to restore their capabilities to be able to deal with all crimes, but they haven't really got the equipment at the moment.
I also am not sure that I would want the government to carry on in this vein. I mean, when you have the threat of arrest for social media posts, when you have the police reacting so swiftly, sentences that are so strict, there is a slight risk that it goes a little too far and it becomes an affront to civil liberties. That does, and in many ways, it's very surprising that a government of lefty lawyers are the people doing this, but they've shown their teeth.
And when we reflected on the 2011 riots, most people concluded that a lot of those sentences were potentially too harsh and it was too quick, and those people were made an example of. So maybe when we look back on this, we might come to some similar conclusions.
There's big questions there, unresolved questions, but I'm afraid that's all we've got time for in that particular segment. Coming up, though, 703. That's the astonishing number of people who crossed the Channel by small boat yesterday alone. Tory leadership hopeful James Cleverly blames Labour's rhetoric. But is the former Home Secretary just passing the buck for Tory failures to tackle the problem? That coming up a little bit later. But next, the Prime Minister hits back at Nigel Farage's claim that he poses the biggest threat to free speech we've seen in our history. Is he right?
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is a big old headache because we talk a lot about GP appointments, don't we? But certainly almost everyone I know struggles to see a dentist when they need one.
Yes.
You know the best time to go to a dentist?
When?
2:30. 2:30.
That's actually quite good. It's better than my gags.
The guy that went into Goa, to India, to get his dental treatment, is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, so tell us about that. This is how desperate people are to get treatment now. So what's the story?
OK, the story is a guy couldn't get an appointment at the NHS, so he went all the way to Goa in India to get his dental appointment. Now, I think he probably just wanted to go on holiday, and he thought, I know, why don't I go on holiday to Goa and then get my teeth done? Look, people are travelling in their droves. There's whole aeroplanes full of people with medical tourists. Like in Turkey, you get a whole aeroplane with people with hair implants, things like that.
Well,
Yeah, I was going to go to
turkey teeth, isn't it?
Turkey teeth.
Turkey teeth. Well, now we've got
that's when they strip the tooth down and you have these little pegs.
Yes, they strip them down, but in many cases they strip them down far too low, so the nerve is exposed and it gets infected, and it's exposed to the elements. So you get infection in the tooth, and then you have to essentially take them all off. But by then the infection spreads so far. I was getting my nails done the other day, which I don't do very often, and my nail technician said to me, "Is your dad still a dentist?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, please, can I have an emergency appointment? I went to Turkey and I got my teeth done. And now they look incredible, but I'm in so much pain. They're all infected. She had 15 taken out from the top and 12 from the bottom. And it's an absolute disaster. But this is what people are feeling like they have to do.
So medical tourism doesn't always work.
No, but it shows, doesn't it, Alex, that people can't get their teeth sorted here, so they go elsewhere. Listen, do you floss, by the way?
Don't floss.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation at 22 minutes past 8. Now, the Reform Party leader Nigel Farage, in an interview for Fox News on Sunday, stated that Sir Keir Starmer poses the biggest threat to free speech in the history of this country. Here's what he had to say.
Nobody should use any social media platform to genuinely spread hate or incitement to violence. But what we are allowed to do on social media, or should be allowed to do, is to speculate, is to ask questions. Starmer, by cracking down on that, poses, I think, the biggest threat to free speech we've seen in our history. Yes. I think the reason Musk has been going for Starmer over the last week is he knows what the reaction is going to be.
The biggest threat to free speech in our history? I suppose he's not counting Oliver Cromwell there, but Farage obviously commented amid the controversy surrounding the Prime Minister's plans for restrictions on social media in response to the civil unrest that we've seen in this country. These new plans have been floated following the world's richest man, Elon Musk, repeatedly criticising Keir Starmer on Twitter last week. So are Nigel Farage and Elon Musk right about Sir Keir Starmer? Should we be worried about our right to speak freely? I'm joined now by the former Labour Party advisor, James Mathewson. James, there is a level of concern that we're going to see many more impositions on what we can say, particularly on the online space.
It's interesting, isn't it, Tom? I think when we look at this and when we take it in the round and in the way that it's meant to be viewed, if you are saying something that is damaging, genuinely dangerous to our society and to the world in which we live and to the people in it, then you need to be held accountable to that. And because of the anonymity of social media, we see obviously a huge amount of bile, of hatred on there. And it's something that everybody knows exists. It's something that, for some reason, we've come to tolerate and accept. And somebody like Elon Musk, somebody who has the power to change that himself because he owns a platform entirely, he could change that. He could make it, so that you don't have that anonymity, so you don't have the ability to say racist things and get away with it. This is why governments are forced to act, and why people like Keir Starmer say, well, what choice do you leave us when we need to try and crack down on the hatred and the damaging effect of the rhetoric that we see playing out in our streets?
And yet, Elon Musk lives in a country that has the First Amendment, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution that guarantees the rights of the most heinous individuals to picket the funerals of soldiers, for example, to burn the United States flag, all protected by that First Amendment. Like, clearly, we don't have similar protections in the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, you can get a suspended sentence from a court of law for teaching your pet dog to do to do Nazi salutes. I mean, are we going down a potentially very illiberal route where people could be have a knock on the door for making jokes on social media? I mean, this stuff has happened, and the risk is it happens more and more.
The problem is, Tom, what's a joke? I mean, when we take this in the round and when we look at the situation as a whole. So the other day, I don't mind telling you, I was on another channel, another network, not this network, talking about the riots, talking about the rhetoric behind the far right and the influence online of hate speech on the riots. And I was cut off halfway through by the presenter who disagreed with me. Now, what ensued was me being tweeted by Tommy Robinson. And in the space of time that I was tweeted by Tommy Robinson, he called me a disgusting mess of a human being for having opinions. In that time, I received 8,500 direct messages. I received 125 emails, 82 of which were calling for me to be killed or calling for me to kill myself. And these were by people who were saying that I hate myself because I'm white. Nearly every single one of these direct messages or emails had a racial connotation. And I'm a white man, Tom. I don't get looped in with much racial hate, but every single one of them had racial hate at the heart of it. So if we are blind to this and we don't think this exists, then we are fooling ourselves. And it is at the heart of our country, the heart of our society, and the people who stoke those flames, who benefit from those divisions, then they're going to try and push back on this. And I believe Nigel Farage is one of those individuals, and he needs to be held accountable for his words and his actions.
Right to say that that's horrific, and death threats under any jurisdiction. In the United States, those would be worthy of police investigation. Of course, it's not if you're inciting violence under any system, that is, of course, not okay. But I think this conversation needs more to rest on the edge cases, not the clear incitement. And I worry that we're moving in a very illiberal direction. But James Mathewson, former Labour advisor, really appreciate your time this evening. Let's quickly get the views of my panel, Amy Nicol-Turner and Tim Stanley. Tim, what did you make of what James had to say?
I understand where he's coming from. The concern is that Labour will probably do one of two things, or both. One is to push this idea of something being legal but harmful. So it's technically legal, but it still does harm. So a
third category of speech.
Precisely. And the other thing is more robust hate crime laws, perhaps a new definition of Islamophobia and things like that. So it becomes easier to catch people. I think the much more straightforward solution is to finally make social media platforms treated as a publisher. I work for the Daily Telegraph. If someone writes a racist letter to my newspaper, we wouldn't publish it. If we did publish it, we'd be held directly responsible for it. Why can't social media firms be held responsible?
That would mean Elon Musk or one of his employees going through every single tweet.
It would put anyone is posted. That's my point.
You're just trying to shut Twitter down.
Yeah, that's my point.
He can afford to employ some moderators. I know he sacked the last few, but yeah, good. Recruitment drive for Elon.
But you tweet.
I sometimes tweet.
Right.
I don't
Would you like to waste
racial hatred.
24 hours for your tweets to be approved and published?
I could cope with that. I could cope with that.
What's wrong with that?
That's destroying conversation online.
So?
Well, my goodness me. I mean,
we're having a conversation, we're having a perfectly good, self-moderated, legal conversation right now. Why do you need to have a right to have a... Why do you need to have the right?
Of illiberalism.
Why do you need to have the right to have an offensive conversation online? Why is that so important to you?
It's not even about offensive, it's about legality. Anything that you can't legally shout in the street, you can't say online. It's as simple as that. Keir Starmer hasn't brought in a load of new laws. He's just saying the things that apply to the actual world apply to the social media
is only 10 years old, Tom, and you seem to have developed the idea that it's some sort of Bill of Rights or Magna Carta online, that you have the right to appear on it.
Your arguments were those that were used to shut Voltaire up when he dared to speak against the church.
Why?
Your arguments are the same.
No.
You say, why on earth should anyone be offensive?
I'm not shutting down.
It is offensive speech. It is precisely offensive speech that has moved societies forward.
I'm not shutting anyone down on the basis of the content of their speech. I'm simply saying that you are responsible for what you say, and a publication is is responsible for having
An
published
individual is responsible for what they say on a platform.
Yes.
If you are to say...
And is the platform not responsible for inviting them to speak on it?
Is the town square responsible for what some lunatic yells in the corner of it?
It's not the same. The town square is not privately owned by a multi-billionaire in California.
And if somebody did shut down a town square, then the police would be called, because it's illegal.
Yeah, absolutely, and people can and are regularly sued for what they say on social media.
And they'll be moved on. It's not just a question of legality. They'll be moved on if they say
blithely saying you want to destroy the right to speak freely online. You are blithely saying that we should shut down services like Twitter, forums online, even the GB News comments section, dare I say, on gbnews.com/your-say.
I haven't said it should be shut down.
You're saying it should be treated as a publisher.
Yes. So how's that shutting it down?
That means no one can moderate.
No
one can live comment on anything. The action of live participation would be made illegal by default. By default, because it's impossible to moderate comments in real time.
It would not be made illegal.
It's possible to moderate something to not include inciting racial hatred and violence. That
and we
doesn't
moderate
seem
comments on a newspaper online as well.
There is a fundamental difference between a newspaper where people submit articles for publication, where those articles are then sub-edited and published the next day.
Did we not have
and
free speech before Twitter?
140 character
Did we not
notes.
have free speech before Twitter? I remember life being perfectly colourful and debate-filled before Elon Musk and Twitter.
Did we not have colourful debates before the printing press, Tim Stanley? There was a law brought in under James II, which meant that every single publication from a printing press had to have a licence from the state.
Yes.
Now, of course, this held back progress in this country for quite some time until it was finally repealed.
And you think Twitter is driving human progress?
I think Twitter is the same as the printing press. It's the same as the pamphlets and the leaflets and the coffee houses. That free speech that led to perhaps the American Revolution, certainly the Glorious Revolution, maybe even, dare I say it, the French Revolution.
OK.
Well, I think speech is important.
Of course it is.
So who is Twitter's Thomas
and we will have free speech. But to hear Nigel Farage say that it's just asking questions is so massively disingenuous, because we are just solely talking about speech that is not legal. So inciting racial hatred or inciting violence. And I think we could all live without that.
Well, on that note, there is much more to discuss on this programme. A bit later on, we'll be talking about a sleepy Norfolk village that hits the headlines today as a local row breaks out over whether or not they can fly the Union Jack over the village hall. There are concerns it might be divisive. But why has it become OK to hate our flag? Next, however, we'll be talking about boats. 703 illegal migrants crossed into the country yesterday. Tory leadership hopeful James Cleverly blames Labour's rhetoric for those crossings. But is the former Home Secretary just passing the buck for Tory failures to tackle the problem?
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Clear skies for many tonight will make for good viewing conditions of the meteor shower. It's going to be a fresher night as well compared to last night, but rain will spread into western areas. That's as this area of low pressure developing out to the west will drag in the next weather front. This cold front, though, still clearing across the far southeast through this evening, so still a risk of some thundery downpours, at least at first this evening, but then it will turn much drier and clearer across the whole of the UK. As I said, good viewing conditions for the meteor shower for many of us while it's dark. Temperatures falling away a little lower than last night, quite widely, 12 to 14 degrees in towns and cities. Still a little bit hotter and more humid across the south and east, however. Now, the breeze is going to pick up across western coast through Tuesday morning. We could see some fairly heavy outbreaks of rain at first across parts of West Wales, southwest England, spreading into Northern Ireland and western areas of Scotland as well. Eastern areas, though, a bright and sunny start to the day. Temperatures around 15 or 16 degrees, with lighter winds feeling quite pleasant in that sunshine first thing. However, the winds will start to pick up across northwestern areas around this area of low pressure, western Scotland in particular, seeing a pretty breezy afternoon. And this wet weather will push further inland quite slowly, but it will continue to bring cloudier skies to much of Wales, southwest England, northern England, much of Scotland too. Turning brighter behind it across Northern Ireland, and plenty of sunshine through a lot of the day across eastern areas of England. And here temperatures still climbing towards the high 20s, so still a pretty warm day across eastern areas of England tomorrow. That wet weather will linger across eastern areas of England, though, through Wednesday morning, and elsewhere it will be a much drier and brighter day, still feeling fairly pleasant in the sunshine, but nowhere near as warm as it is at the moment. And then looking ahead to Thursday, it looks like a more widely wetter day. However, the sunshine is set to return for Friday, temperatures around average for the rest of the week.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
703 people in just a day. Yes, that's how many people came across by small boat yesterday into this country. Well, today, the Shadow Home Secretary and Tory leadership hopeful James Cleverly outwardly blamed Labour for the unprecedented number of illegal migrants that crossed the Channel yesterday. Of course, it was the highest number of people that has been recently measured. Mr Cleverly has claimed that Labour's rhetoric encouraged people smugglers and that their poor early decision-making has exacerbated the already critical situation. Let's take a listen.
Over 700 people arrived illegally in small boats to the UK yesterday. Labour said they would smash the gangs. Instead, what they did was remove the Rwanda partnership, which was a deterrent to the people smugglers. Their rhetoric encouraged people smugglers, and the tragic consequences are now clear for all of us to see.
Well, is James Cleverly right? Or is he just deflecting from the failure of his own government? Of course, he was Home Secretary until about 5 minutes ago. Is he deflecting from his failure to stop the boats? Let's get the views of my panel now, the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol-Turner and Daily Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley. Amy, what do you make of what James Cleverly had to say?
I think he's trying to be the Tory leadership. He's trying to get Tory leadership, isn't he? So I think it was very disingenuous because he's overseen thousands and thousands and thousands of people getting in these boats, and any form of deterrent has never worked.
Well, we haven't had a form of deterrent up and running.
Well, but in 2021, we closed the remaining safe and legal routes, and the numbers quadrupled. So what that says to me is that what we really need are some safe and legal routes for more nationalities, and then maybe people would stop dying in the Channel at the rate that they are.
So the way to stop illegal migrants from coming to the UK is just to make them legal migrants?
Well, currently there's no legitimate way of claiming asylum. So if there isn't that, then of course they're going to use irregular means.
Tim?
Oh, well, it's difficult to have some safe and legal routes. For instance, Iran, I mean, a large number of asylum seekers in Europe are from Iran. Where's your safe and legal route going to run from? So that's complicated. But yes, it does seem silly to blame Labour only a few weeks into office for the spike in numbers. And what Labour would say is the spike in numbers has come because the asylum programme has failed. And Rwanda wasn't working as a deterrent because only a handful of volunteers actually went to Rwanda. Having said that, though, if you go across the Atlantic to America and you look at the precedent there, a mixture of what Joe Biden did when he entered office, such as rolling back on the Remain in Mexico policy, which is a little bit like Rwanda in principle, as in you can't just come here, you have to be processed somewhere else. Rolling back that, but also Biden's rhetoric, making it very clear that he was friendly to immigration and that he welcomed asylum seekers, that did lead to a massive spike in people trying to cross the Mexico border. So though it's difficult to prove, I suspect that people knowing that Rwanda is no longer a threat probably will encourage some people to try who wouldn't have tried before. And I guess that's the crux of Cleverly's argument. But having said that, and this has got to be asked of all the Tory leadership contenders, are you going to bring Rwanda back? Given the amount of money that was wasted on it, given that Labour has subsequently cancelled it, are you willing to write all those contracts again and hire all those people again and repeat the same expensive experiment twice? I really doubt they would.
And for how many people? 200 people?
And yet, Amy, we were talking earlier about the example sentences that have been given to some of these rioters. The longer sentences than rapists and all the rest of it. And the argument there is that this will put off people from rioting. You make an example out of a number, you publicise that example, and then you solve the problem.
Yeah.
Is Rwanda not precisely the same logic?
I thought you were going to go for why don't we make examples of the people smugglers? Because currently we've got more people smugglers than drug smugglers. And we never seem to, as they've said so many times, smash the gangs. The gangs are predominantly living in the UK, the leaders of these people smuggling gangs. We can find Osama bin Laden, we can bring...
Took 10 years.
But, you know, we're capable of this type of things. We know what these people are. The intelligence knows. So why are they not going for the people smugglers, making an example of them, and, just bringing more attention to that?
What our Home and Security editor, Mark White, often says on this is that you raise the comparison with the illegal drug trade. It is precisely the correct comparison to draw because this is a very profitable business. These boats are hundreds of thousands of pounds of money for these smugglers. And the issue is a bit like whack-a-mole. If you whack one gang, well, there's the profit incentive there for another one to spring up and make hundreds of thousands of pounds.
That's why the war on immigration is as futile as the war on drugs.
So
but I know every
what's
time
the
I say
answer
that, well, I feel like I'm banging my head against the desk because I keep saying more safe and legal routes.
But Tim, under the 1951 UN Convention on Refugees, millions of people have the theoretical right to come to the United Kingdom. Anyone from an unsafe country, anyone from Afghanistan, anyone from Iran could make their way to the UK, and under the terms of that convention we are a party to, they're a refugee.
And this is the problem, depending on how you see it, that until we actually rethink the philosophy and the legal structure by which we process asylum, you can never stop this happening, because in principle we have to consider everyone who arrives as a legal asylum seeker. There's no such thing.
But currently we're not even doing that.
As an illegal asylum seeker.
If we could process these claims and let these people continue with their lives quicker, then there wouldn't be a massive cost to the taxpayer.
Well, and
the
also
people don't want to be in the
people back
hotel
quicker as well.
any more than we don't want to pay for them to be in hotels.
Right. My question here is why do people always talk about the ECHR when we should be talking about the 51 Convention, which, if I'm not mistaken, Tony Blair made a speech about in the early 2000s, saying this is outdated, this was for a time when very few people could move around the world. I mean, there wasn't the jet engine, there wasn't, mass migration. We're in a very different age now. Why is the 51 Convention still in place?
Well, partly because it speaks to an idealism, which I think is fair. I mean, if someone knocks on your door and says, I need help, you don't say to them no because you passed by several doors before you got to me. You're obliged as a fellow human being to consider them because they are where they are. There are also very good reasons why some people might not choose to stay in one country but move on to another. It might be safer. They might know people there. They might have profound cultural links to that place. But frankly, I think one thing that's very interesting to watch is how Tory leadership contenders answer these questions and what they say about the ECHR. They're showing a bit of leg on it and saying that they would consider pulling out of it, which was exactly Rishi Sunak's position. But most of them won't commit to actually doing it. And the reason why they won't is because the Conservative Party in Parliament still has a large number of people who themselves would vote against that. So there isn't even a consensus within the Tory party to fix that bit. And if you can't fix that bit, you can't do Rwanda, which is why I come back to ask the leadership contenders, are you really going to revive the Rwanda scheme when on almost every level it's dead and can't be brought back?
Really, really interesting point. We will have to bring that question up to all of the contenders as and when we have them on. Amy, Tim, thank you so much for joining us today on State of the Nation. I've got a mea culpa to make now. In the last segment, I was speaking about James II. I said that he presided over an act that prohibited the printing press from printing anything without a licence. I'm afraid I got that wrong. It was actually Charles II. He was on the throne when the Licensing of the Press Act 1662 was passed. He was responsible for the 17th century version of Tim Stanley's ideal Twitter regulation. But there we go. I'm glad that I could make that correction. I don't think I could live with myself if I hadn't. Now, coming up next. A sleepy Norfolk village hits the headlines today as a local row breaks out over whether to fly the Union Jack over the village hall, all over concerns that our flag could be divisive. Why has it become OK to hate on our national flag?
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A lot of people will be saying 22%, inflation's 2%. This is inflation busting. It's a massive pay rise with £2.7 trillion in national debt and rising. This costs £1 billion a year, £5 billion over the term of the Labour government. Why on earth do junior doctors deserve it?
Junior doctors have been overworked and underpaid for many years now. And in the UK, good health in our population is the bedrock for getting the UK economy growing again back to its best. So we need an NHS that's able to deliver elective care for our parents, operations, A&E service when our children need it. And that means we need doctors in our hospitals paid fairly, motivated to be there, rather than leaving for Australia, which many of my colleagues have been doing throughout the year that I've been working. So I think we need to invest in our health service. This is a crucial first step to do so.
What about the notion that a lot of people are saying, wow, hey presto, as if by magic, this has been resolved 5 minutes into a Labour term. Is there a political element to this? Were the junior doctors and the unions simply unprepared to negotiate with the Conservatives, and as soon as Labour get in, wallop, it's a done deal?
I think there were really genuine frustrations felt by junior doctors over recent years, exhaustion off the back of COVID and previously, but also the sense that pay wasn't keeping up with cost of living. And this is the first pay deal that listens to those concerns seriously, that embeds a pay rise that considers that, but also that talks about other concerns. So rotational training around the country that took where people live out of their control, sending people off to Plymouth with a few weeks' notice. I think that this deal puts staff wellbeing first and therefore puts our patients' wellbeing first as well.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is State of the Nation at 48 minutes past 8. Now, locals in the rural village of Claxton in Norfolk, yes, that's Claxton with an X, not Clacton without an X. Well, some locals have voiced opposition to the Union flag being hoisted outside their village hall due to fears of it being too divisive. One resident opposed the plan, stating there is a fine line between patriotism and nationalism. But is this political correctness gone mad? Well, our national reporter, Charlie Peters, was in Claxton earlier today, speaking to local residents.
The Union flag, a symbol of unity or one of division. Well, here in Claxton, a village in Norfolk, for some, the cloth of our country is considered a divisive symbol that could be associated with nationalism. In May, the Village Hall Committee for the building just behind me decided they wanted to erect a flagpole here in the centre of the village in order to display our national flag. But at a parish council meeting last month set to pass the motion, some people spoke from the floor and said that there were links with the national flag and nationalism, saying that there was a fine line between patriotism and nationalism. One man speaking for 15 minutes saying that he preferred to see bunting and not the Union flag on a flagpole due to those so-called negative connotations. Well, in this village of 300, the majority won, and the Union flag will be raised high and proud here in this village in Norfolk. And one local, Dick Thompson, gave me his response to those trying to stop the national flag from being flown.
I think I'm very patriotic. I think we should have a flagpole. Definitely want the Union Jack up when is necessary. I don't like to see lots of other flags up, I must say, but I can't see where there's any great. But there's only one or two against it. It's not everybody.
Some people have said that the Union flag could be a sign of nationalism and that it was divisive. What's your reaction to that?
Is it rubbish? That's a load of rubbish. It's not divisive. It's our flag. Every country shows their flags.
Well, other locals I've spoken to here today told me that the main complainant against the flag being displayed later turned up at a birthday party in the village. And what greeted him when he walked in? Well, a large Union flag on the wall. And sources close to the party told GB News that the man did not leave. So clearly, the national flag, in some circumstances, doesn't offend those who want to stop it from being flown on a flagpole here in Claxton.
What an extraordinary story. And might I just say that Dick Thompson, the local resident, likely speaks for many. Well, joining me now is the Conservative group leader on North Norfolk District Council, Councillor Christopher Cushing. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is an extraordinary story. It seems that a very small group, perhaps even just one agitator, has held up what the clear majority of local residents want to happen.
No, I agree with you, Tom. When I read the article on the Saturday's edition of the Eastern Daily Press, it certainly surprised me and also saddened me. I do think it's certainly, speaking on behalf of Norfolk, I think it's clear minority position. I think most people, I'm actually sure the vast majority of people in Norfolk take pride in our flag as it represents what is great about Britain, which is fairness, decency and tolerance.
What has surprised me perhaps most about this story, because there'll always be, you know, small elements of society who will sort of want to take a principled or contrarian stance on things, and we should embrace that diversity of viewpoint. Of course we should. But the new local MP for the area, a Labour Member of Parliament, has said, I don't want to get involved in this conversation. Both sides are making good points. I find it pretty astonishing that an elected Member of Parliament can be so ambivalent towards the divisiveness or otherwise of our national flag.
Well, I completely agree. That certainly, I expected him to step up to the mark and clearly state his support for the flag. It's very clear from what I've read in the reports that all residents want to do is put a flag up and fly the Union flag on occasions, as is the case with probably most other parishes and towns in Norfolk and I suspect across the whole country. I wouldn't have thought that was a very contentious issue. I thought there's something very easily that the Labour Party would support. And I might actually add, if you look, we just had a general election. If you look on the Labour Party literature and one of their posters, they actually have the Union flag on there anyway. So I'm sure
they certainly do. Well, Christopher Cushing, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, the Conservative group leader on North Norfolk District Council. Up next, it's Patrick Christie's. Patrick, what's coming up?
Well, loads on, Tom. This Islamophobia definition. Is it a blasphemy law by the back door? We're also policing social media whilst, unfortunately, children are stabbed. Have they got the priorities wrong? 700 illegal migrants yesterday. A Labour trying to scare people into not talking about this, and compulsory purchasing on the Green Belt. Plus, loads more, Tom.
Well, absolutely cracking stuff. Up next, it's the weather, and by the way, it's sunny in Somerset.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Clear skies for many tonight will make for good viewing conditions of the meteor shower. It's going to be a fresher night as well compared to last night, but rain will spread into western areas. That's as this area of low pressure developing out to the west will drag in the next weather front. This cold front, though, still clearing across the far southeast through this evening, so still a risk of some thundery downpours, at least at first this evening, but then it will turn much drier and clearer across the whole of the UK. As I said, good viewing conditions for the meteor shower for many of us while it's dark. Temperatures falling away a little lower than last night, quite widely, 12 to 14 degrees in towns and cities. Still a little bit hotter and more humid across the south and east, however. Now, the breeze is going to pick up across western coast through Tuesday morning. We could see some fairly heavy outbreaks of rain at first across parts of West Wales, southwest England, spreading into Northern Ireland and western areas of Scotland as well. Eastern areas, though, a bright and sunny start to the day. Temperatures around 15 or 16 degrees, with lighter winds feeling quite pleasant in that sunshine first thing. However, the winds will start to pick up across northwestern areas around this area of low pressure, western Scotland in particular, seeing a pretty breezy afternoon. And this wet weather will push further inland quite slowly, but it will continue to bring cloudier skies to much of Wales, southwest England, northern England, much of Scotland too. Turning brighter behind it across Northern Ireland, and plenty of sunshine through a lot of the day across eastern areas of England. And here temperatures still climbing towards the high 20s, so still a pretty warm day across eastern areas of England tomorrow. That wet weather will linger across eastern areas of England, though, through Wednesday morning, and elsewhere it will be a much drier and brighter day, still feeling fairly pleasant in the sunshine, but nowhere near as warm as it is at the moment. And then looking ahead to Thursday, it looks like a more widely wetter day. However, the sunshine is set to return for Friday, temperatures around average for the rest of the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on a chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christie's. Tonight. 700 illegal immigrants came across the Channel yesterday. Rachel Reeves said that there would be riots if we didn't sort out immigration. Are Labour ignoring the problem? Plus,
I jumped on him, hold the hand in which he wasn't having a knife, and I just put him down on the floor and just hold him and kick the knife away from him.
Policing Twitter while children are stabbed on the streets. Has Starmer got his priorities wrong? And Labour's Islamophobia definition. Is it a blasphemy law by the back door? Also,
now, Starmer, by cracking down on that, poses, I think, the biggest threat to free speech we've seen in our history.
children are now